A convoy of US Navy ships passed through the Suez Canal in Egypt. It included the destroyer USS James Williams and the attack submarine the USS Toledo. The vessels are set to bolster forces in the Mediterranean. It's not known if they will eventually be bound for the coast of Syria.
President Barack Obama and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have bandied thousands of words against and for an Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear sites. On 3 consecutive days, however, Iran's leaders continued to roar that Israel must be destroyed irrespective of whether or not it attacks the Islamic Republic. President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was cheered by Al-Quds demonstrators when he declared Israel is a cancerous tumor that will soon be finished off in the new Middle East. He added, the Zionist regime's existence is also an insult to all humanity. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said the fake Zionist regime will disappear from the landscape of geography, and Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Aerospace Force Chief Brigadier General Amir Hajizadeh said an Israeli attack would be welcome as a pretext to get rid of Israel for good. In September 2006, Benjamin Netanyahu recalled the words of a Holocaust survivor who said,
is that if somebody tells you that he's going to exterminate you, believe him. And I add to that, believe him and stop him.
Certain Western intelligence sources now suggest the Israeli Prime Minister may be willing to go further, not only to stop them, but kill them. They use the term decapitation for raids that would target Iranian leaders as well as nuclear facilities.
A common sight in Jerusalem these days, gas mask distribution, as a possible armed conflict with Iran seems to be looming. Nahal Shetrit brought her children here to get outfitted.
I hope we will not need the mask. We will not have to use them. It is very, very scary.
Every day brings new rumors and theories. Alon Ben David, a prominent Israeli TV reporter, says the Netanyahu government is ramping up preparations for a strike against Iran's nuclear facilities.
The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appears very determined to launch a strike against Iran before US elections. That means before November. So anytime between now and November is the window of opportunity.
An upcoming report by the International Atomic Energy Agency is expected to find that Iran may be accelerating work on its nuclear program. And with Tehran recently showing off new short-range missiles, Israel's leadership believes there is little time left to act, says Ben David.
His sense is that these are the last minutes to remove that existential threat from Israel, what he sees in his eyes as existential threat, and he really believes that if he won't do it, no one else will.
A direct swipe at the U.S. Washington is against unilateral Israeli action. The Obama administration saying there is still time for sanctions to work. And even a majority of Israelis believe their country should not go it alone, according to a recent poll. Political analyst Uri Dromi believes the Netanyahu government isn't doing enough to get the American government on board.
I'm surprised that he's not working enough to gain the confidence of the American administration and other elements to gain support for this.
As Israel ramps up its preparations for repercussions of a possible strike against Iran's nuclear facilities, many here fear they might be involved in a war before year's end. But just how close Israel really is to launching a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities remains unclear. Some analysts say if they were really on the brink of an attack, they certainly wouldn't be talking so much about it. Fred Blanken, CNN,
Chilling new
Jerusalem.
details in the nuclear standoff with Iran. In the lead up to Election Day here in the United States, we're expecting the UN's nuclear watchdog agency to lay out a stark reality. Here's how the New York Times put it, quote, despite increasingly painful sanctions and a covert program called Olympic Games that aimed to slow the Iranian program of cyber attacks, Iran has made substantial progress in producing enriched uranium in recent years, from about 1 bomb's worth when Mr. Obama took office in 2009 to the equivalent of about 5 bombs worth today. That again from the New York Times. What does this mean for our security here at home? And our next step, Michael Singh is with us, former Senior Director of Middle East Affairs at the National Security Council, right now a Managing Director at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. So Michael, what does that mean?
Well, Jenna, it means that despite everything that we've done on sanctions, on nuclear talks, that Iran continues to creep closer and closer to having the nuclear weapons capability that we've been trying to stop it from having. And I think as we look at this report, Jenna, we're looking for 3 things. Number 1 is how many centrifuges is Iran operating? Number 2 is how efficient are those centrifuges? Have they installed advanced centrifuges? And the third and really most critical, Jenna, is to what level are they enriching? Are they getting closer to that bomb-grade uranium that they need? And so far what we've seen from Iran, Jenna, is that as the talks go into these kind of lulls, these dead periods, as it were, Iran uses that to rush forward, and that's what we might see here.
So one of the reports that, again, that we expect to see, and we expect these reports over the next couple of days, one report says that the country has added upwards of 1,000 new machines, 1,000 new machines near a military base near Guam. And that supposedly is a base, Michael, and you probably know better than us, so please share with us, an area that is invulnerable to military attack. Is that right?
Well, Jen, I don't know that it's invulnerable to attack, but it certainly is very deep underground, and there's a concern that would be much harder to get at than many of Iran's other facilities, and that is in part driving this kind of U.S.-Israel tension over what is the right time to attack, what is the right criteria for attack.
And so the timetable on that, some are bringing this up. You know this is as we do, Michael, this term October surprise. Something happens right before the election where the president has to act. What are the chances of that actually happening, in your opinion?
Well, I think the chances are indeed going up, Jenna, and we'll see what this report says, and if it reveals big new advances by Iran, as the Israeli Prime Minister has suggested, then I think that does really increase the fear of an attack. And part of what's driving this, Jenna, I think, is that the U.S. and Israel, while both ostensibly are committed to stopping Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, have big differences when it comes both to what are we willing to tolerate from Iran, as well as what is the right timing for an attack. I think Israel, because it has limited military capacity and isn't going to depend on anyone, including the United States, to safeguard its security, thinks that an attack has to happen sooner as Iran's program gets bigger and more advanced.
One analyst, though, told me that you have to watch Israel when they're quiet. You don't have to watch them as much when they're talking. Is that true, Michael? Again, in your opinion, with all of this out there, and I don't want to call it bluster because I think that's editorializing a little bit. This is obviously a very serious issue. Is there some truth in that, though?
Well, I think it's hard to generalize. I mean, this is something where we've all been conditioned, in a sense, to expect an attack, that this is a possibility that may happen. And so it's easy to say, well, this is just bluster, this is more of the same. And I think there's certainly an element here of Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu trying to get the international community to do more through his words. That's what he keeps saying, is more needs to be done. Part of this, though, is the natural debate that happens in Israel, which is a democracy, over is this the right time to attack? And he's trying to win the political argument at home as well as sway international opinion. So I don't think we can draw any generalizations.
That's a good point for us to reflect on. Real quick, Michael, we're going to be hearing from both parties over the next 2 weeks. Foreign policy is obviously a big issue. What should we be asking of our leaders, whoever they are, in the next term when it comes to Iran?
Well, I think that what this comes down to between the Republicans and the Democrats, Jen, in many ways, is what are we willing to accept from Iran? Because one thing that doesn't get much notice here is that U.S. red lines on Iran have inexorably shifted under President Obama. That we used to be saying Iran can't enrich uranium. Now it's a matter of, well, yeah, they can enrich some, but how much? And I think we have to be careful about that sort of shifting in red lines happening underneath the radar. And that's the question we should ask, is what can we really live with when it comes to an Iranian nuclear capacity?
A good question for us to reflect on, Michael. Always nice to have you. Thanks for joining us on a special edition on a Sunday. We have you hard at work, and we appreciate it. Look forward to having you back.